0710, July 1st, 2026, right now marks 2,579 hours of progress on the global heart simulation. Currently, it has been figured out how to implement a fog of war reveal effect that works in 3D. So basically what's going on here is that there is a scene that has a bunch of random objects being spawned with random colors within the boundary of a round plane object. Well, technically it's a cube and not a plane, as cubes are easier to manage their size, being that they originally scale to 1 on the unit axis, whereas a plane starts out a bit larger. But anyway, so basically how this is done is using a color buffer, or a shader that accesses the depth buffer and color buffer, and what that basically allows to happen is fog of war without adding extra geometry to the scene and without the need for a texture above the level. And so as a demonstration of how that occurs, basically any pixel that is not near the player is masked. And so mask occurs, and actually looking at the material, the blending between the scene color and the fog of war color is able to be done through the shaders accessing of the color buffer, and then it blends between the fog and the scene color depending on the strength set, and setting that to the maximum hides things completely. And so one could imagine if one wanted to leave a trail, one could use a color such as that for areas that have been previously visited but are not currently visible. But one of the things about this is that currently it doesn't support a trail, as the reason some fog of war versions can support trails is they usually use a texture, and points along the world are stored within the pixels of the texture, and then because it's a texture, the state of that coordinate can be transferred between frames. And so currently the idea for this to implement trails without a texture is to use voxels. So the intention going forward, now that this is working and proven to be possible, is to create fog of war that is fully 3D using voxels that can also leave a trail. And another advantage of voxels would be the possibility of supporting line of sight more readily, as originally it was thought to use volumetric height fog for the fog of war effect, though height fog can be a lot more computationally expensive to render, as well as it having the problem of needing to support all sorts of different lights through the code customly, and it would be harder to implement with volumetric height fog. As stated, one might have to figure out how to get that to work properly with the scene lights and other colors within the scene. But through accessing the color buffer directly, one can basically bypass the materials, lights, shadows, basically everything, and then just directly override that. And so this fog of war cannot be affected by any scene lights or any other sort of thing. It's basically a post-processing effect that overrides everything. And so the intention going forward is to look into leaving a trail for this system via the usage of voxels.